In hardware, it's relatively easy to build something that works, but it's much harder to build something that lasts. This conversation is about that gap, why it exists, and what it takes to close it. Hello, friends. You are watching the season number 4 of the Green New Perspective podcast. And today we are talking about what it really takes to build and rebuild a hardware business. My guest is Marleen Vogelaar. She's a CEO and co-owner of Shapeways, a company that is actually a pioneer when we talk about 3D printing and digital manufacturing. Building physical products, I'm positively sure that this episode is going to challenge a lot of assumptions you've taken for granted. Watch the interview, watch it if you're on YouTube, listen to it if you're on Spotify, and then tell us your thoughts in the comment section. Enjoy the conversation.
This episode of Green New Perspective is brought to you by New Perspective Marketing. For over 20 years, New Perspective has helped future-focused B2B tech companies grow by building thought leadership, attracting better qualified leads, and driving pipeline growth. If you're ready for smart strategies, measurable results, and a partner who's invested in your success, visit npws.com to learn more. Hello, Marleen, and welcome to the Green New Perspective podcast.
Hi. Good morning.
So for our listeners who are discovering your story for the first time, how would you describe the journey that led you to found Shapeways, the company that we are going to talk about in this podcast, right?
Oh, well, that's been many moons ago, but back in 2008, there was, there was this thing about 3D printing, and it was really quite magical. The idea that you could just make anything with help of 3D printing. Me and two other co-founders, actually within a lifestyle incubator, Philips Electronics at the time, we ended up building consumer business idea around 3D printing. And so this was in 2008 when we went live, and Shapeways at that moment in time was actually the world's first upload and print 3D printing service. So where nowadays it's actually quite normal to upload a 3D file, a CAD file to a website and get a quote. We were back then the first one who did it, and it was actually quite complex to build software that could check files and see if it was printable. But we went live, and it was really focused. We really wanted back then consumers to be able to have access to 3D printing, because that didn't really exist. It was incredibly expensive at the time. It was also rather slow in service. And what we built was an ability for anybody who had 3D files on their computer to get them physically into their hands. And so it was all about mass democratization at that moment in time. And then the whole 3D printing hype happened in 09, 10, 11, 12, and we kind of rode along with that. We were part of creating the hype and rode along with it. Rising tide lifts all boats.
And what the company does today? How has the mission evolved?
Different company now. It's a very different company nowadays. Shapeways itself is not focused anymore on the consumer business. It is now a fully B2B business that is focused on working with digital native teams, engineering companies, hardware companies that are developing next-gen hardware. So it can be robots, drones, appliances, consumer tech. That space is developing incredibly quickly under the influence of AI. Probably talk more about it later. And we do small volume production for these types of companies. Not only on the prototyping side, but specifically in the whole life cycle from prototyping to actually getting these things to market and market production to after service and to after service care. And so that's what we do nowadays. We still have a consumer side to Shapeways, but that is part of that is a sister company, the company that we've bought, which is thanks.com, which is kind of the continuation of the old Shapeways mission, where we really enable 3D designers to build a business around their designs, and for consumers to find beautiful 3D files or 3D prints that they want to have. And that is thanks.com.
And how are these changes reflecting into your journey as a co-founder?
Well, that is quite a story, because I I actually, when we started the company, I was responsible for both finance and operations. Shapeways is growing incredibly quick at that time. You know, we were part of the zeitgeist, I guess. We probably created part of it as well. But people were really eager to get something that they had on their computer to get it into their hands. It could be anything. It could be a piece of jewelry, a piece of home decor, a spare part for something that they were repairing. It could be a train model that they want to paint later. It was like literally everything. Most of the things that we were making at the time were like one piece at a time of like literally anything you can, anything people can think of. And so at that time, I was really busy scaling the company, building a factory in the Netherlands where we originated from. But we actually had moved the company to New York City, where I still live. Build a factory here, build a big global vendor network, build all the automation around it, to be able to deliver this and sustain this type of growth. And in 2014, I actually decided to leave the company. Quite heartbroken, to be honest. But we had worked with a number of, VCs at that moment in time. There was just a massive discrepancy between what was good for the company long term and what was, normal in the VC world to aspire for. And there were just different incentives there because for, a big venture capital company, you're one of many portfolio companies and they need to push for massive growth. And so we got massive investments, millions and millions of dollars. But those investments didn't always make sense because we were mostly, our start market was a 3D printing hobbyist. And that market is not the worldwide market of consumers yet. And 3D printing wasn't really ready for the consumer market because the materials weren't there, the finishes weren't really quite there. So there was, Shapeways was, at that moment in time was building a really beautiful business around these hobbyists and enabling them. But in order to create massive growth, which what a VC wants in order to get a return in their portfolio, it needed to scale really, really big time. But we were not just a software company. We were actually making things. And you can't go times 1,000 in 1 year or whatever it has to be. So there were all these lofty goals that were not really possible. But in the meantime, we were actually building a really good company. And so that tension just became bigger and bigger that didn't make any sense. And I was like, oh, this company is going to go bankrupt. I just never realized it took about 7 years to do so until after I left. And so I left, I moved on. I ended up working in on-demand manufacturing, but in the clothing industry for about 10 years. And then the company actually went public with a SPAC. It was basically a very complicated funding round, in my opinion, nothing else but that. And then the new leadership that was at Shapeways at the time, they created a business model that had too much cost for being public, way too much spending on SG&A and investments in pipe dreams that had nothing to do with the original business model. And so they sank the company 2.5 years after going public. And that was last year in early July. And in the background, a few months beforehand, I mean, everybody could see the company would go bankrupt if it wouldn't be sold. And my old team from the Netherlands reached back out. We got connected again. And they were like, Marleen, we want to save this company. I'm like, absolutely, hell yes, you should. Because there's too much, there's too much great clients, there's too much vendors, there's too much employees. There's just the value created, the value that it has in the 3D printing world is really there. It just was, it didn't make any sense that it would go down because the core of the business model was actually really healthy. Uh-huh. Financially really healthy, and that was easy to see and recognize. And then one thing led to another when we made a bid on the company before it went bankrupt, but that was not accepted. And I think that was a blessing in disguise in a way, at least for the new business, maybe not so much for other people involved with Shapeways at the time. And early July of last year it went bankrupt, and then about a whole good group of people in the Netherlands where the core of the culture and the core of the team was still very much alive, and a way of delivering a good product, because that's what they were doing in the Netherlands, was still very much alive. And next day, everybody, big group of people went back to work, and now we're here. And we saved the business.
And what's the experience like walking back into a team that was ready to support you before anything was finalized?
It was really It was really wonderful. We got, I still knew about 30-ish% of the people from the old days. And they were like, oh, if Marleen is involved, you can trust her, which was really sweet because I've been away for 10 years. So, because, we were talking and it's like, can you help? I'm like, sure, I can help. And, I was in a little bit of a transition myself. So I was able to come in. I called one of my other old co-founders, Robert, and I knew he was also in transition. I said, Robert, you want to do this again? And he was like, yeah. Like this just didn't make any sense. And like, the guys in Eindhoven, we said, okay, let's do it. And so it was a double feel. It was a strange feeling because it was really good to come home again in a way. It is very satisfying to help retain as many jobs as you can and save, the jobs of many people. You can't save them all. So people were very hurt, and a lot of them, by this. And, it was not my responsibility. I didn't cause that, but you still feel that, we're all humans. So it was a really exhilarating ride in a way. It was also very scary. There were a number of private equity companies, big private equity companies with deep pockets that wanted to buy it. Much deeper pockets than we were able to organize through the investors that we had found to play out the fact that we had a team. And we had the team support, and they went for it. There's a great amount of people that are part of this core team that we couldn't, all of them, we couldn't have missed them. So yeah, it felt really nice to be back, to get that trust. Scary to get it from being able to first buy assets in Holland and then leveraging those assets in order to buy the American assets, which is where the trademark was, which is where a lot of the IP was around software. Then, in a period from in that early July, in August, we were up and running again, selling to existing customers. They came back because they trusted the Eindhoven Netherlands team. They came back because they loved the quality. So in early August, 4 weeks later, we were running again under a new silly name. It wasn't silly, but it was all a name that we never, we were hoping it wouldn't be a long-term name. And then, as we built out the business in those months, then by December of last year of 24, we were able to buy the assets in the US back, which was the brand name and the IP. And with that, we were able to announce ourselves back into the world and be Shapeways again. And that's what happened.
And what was the silly name?
Manuevo. It's not silly, but it's like, it was like manufacturing and new and kind of combined, So it's fine. It's still part, it's still the legal name of our entity in the Netherlands. We hold it dear. It's part of our history now, and and part of our Phoenix story.
And what would you say that this situation has taught you about leadership?
The trust that was given to me, even after having been away for 10 years, that is quite amazing. So that's my personal experience. And that has also been really healing in a way for me, because I left not because I didn't like the team. I left not because I didn't believe in the company. I left because I saw a disconnect between the long-term future of the company and where it was going under a VC direction. And so the fact that after 10 years, people that trust is still there, I thought it was really special and was personally healing for me. But I think the big lesson for me here is that the company culture itself and the people that are making things happen day to day, that if they believe in something and say like, this is worthwhile fighting for, everybody just started running. And so from a leadership point of view, this was more, the five of us working together, finding everybody the right role. It was kind of interesting, but also letting the people in the team do what they needed to do, because there's things that happened on the tech side I can never replicate. It's impossible. I was not able to do that, but I worked with the trustees and I did the financing, and everybody had a role. And letting everybody play that role was really important. And especially with this new team, we were a new team. One of them was an old co-founder. Two of them are people that I hired in the past over 10 years ago. And one of them I didn't even know. And we had to form a team. And what I've really learned in the last year is that, everybody put their egos aside. It doesn't really exist. And wherever we needed to do things, we put the right person for that role. So we've been actually quite fluid within the team of moving tasks or responsibilities depending on where the right person fits at that moment in time. And like, hey, if that's somebody else and it's not me, great, go do it. And if it's and the other way around. And I think that's worked out really well. And that sometimes gives confusion to the organization underneath, like who's doing what and why. But that's solidified now. It's spanned out. Everybody now has their roles, but we remain very flexible in like making sure that we put the right person in the right place, depending on where their talents are, and displaying to those talents as, for me, been really one of the bigger stories here.
Most manufacturers have the same challenge: marketing, sales, and finance all looking at different numbers. In this webinar, we'll walk you through how to set up HubSpot so everything connects, letting you see cost per request for quote, pipeline velocity, payback period, and true revenue impact in one unified view. If you want real visibility into marketing's impact, register today.
And during this rebuild, let's call it that way,
Yeah.
how did you determine what to keep, what to change, what to eliminate?
Oh, that was actually quite simple. Yes, because we had the team. I knew the business really well, but I had been away for 10 years. So you need to have a little bit of, you have to also you have to really depend on the team and the new co-founders there with you to tell you like what the real situation is. But basically, Shapeways is spending too much money on being a public company. So that costs like millions of dollars a year, just all the regulations and the reporting that you need to do. And it makes no sense for a mid-sized company to be public because it takes, it just kills your profit margins. So just making it private again makes the company already more profitable. Then the company had a very high SG&A with ridiculous management salaries. And you have to have a salary that is congruent with the profitability of your company. And you cannot take more than that. So that was easy. There's also plain morals, to be honest. Sorry, but yeah. And so that was like two very big portions of why the company was not making money. And then there was actually a pipe dream, which was a software development that was being done on something completely new that had nothing to do with Shapeways selling low volume production runs to industrial customers. It was about some marketplace like a database for finding a factory or something. But there was like so much money being poured into that in those last years before the bankruptcy. So that was sold off before the bankruptcy to another company. And so we had no longer the cost of that. We would have also just killed it. And that's it. That's all we had to do. We're just focusing on building, doing low volume production for hardware teams that are building next gen robots, appliances, and any device under the sun. And we've just went back to the core, and that's it. That core business was a profitable model. It was a profitable model, and it still is. So, yeah.
And from a brand perspective, how did you rethink communication, positioning, or storytelling during this turnaround?
It was interesting because there was two things there's a couple of things. First of all, in the general 3D printing market, and also with our customers, the majority were very positive about us restarting. So, especially because the Eindhoven, the Netherlands team had a very good name, had a solid name around quality and reliability. People were very helpful to have us restart. So that part of the brand name was still very much intact, even though there was this bankruptcy and this kind of Wall Street-y, money grabber, whatever kind of feeling to it. But in the 3D printing market, people like vendors, customers, other partners, everybody quickly recognized who the core team was bringing this back, and everywhere people stepped up. We still have former employees from the last 18 years coming back and joining us again, even though they might have been away 5, 6, or 10 years. I mean, it's really quite lovely. But from a branding perspective, we said, okay, we're back to who we used to be. We're now focused on B2B, on next-gen hardware. What we did do is we did buy Thanks, which at that moment in time was a 3D printing marketplace. We bought that in December, a 3D file sharing marketplace. And we bought that in December of 24 as well. So it was a busy month for me buying things. But, there were thousands and thousands of, we had thousands and thousands of community members at Shapeways who were at that moment in time before the bankruptcy making a living selling 3D prints through the Shapeways platform. Because even though it had went B2B, that old marketplace that we had where consumers were active buying on Shapeways and where designers were active selling on Shapeways 3D prints, that marketplace still existed. And with the bankruptcy, that marketplace disappeared because the trustee killed off all the files and the models, so that was gone. But we knew we had thousands of these designers that we wanted to give a new home. And we knew we still had so many consumers coming to Shapeways wanting to buy these types of products. So that's why we actually bought Thanks to find a new home for these designers. So Thanks now is not only a 3D file sharing marketplace, but also marketplace where people can buy 3D prints that are created by designers. And so we've created a new home. So from a marketing perspective, we said, okay, we really wanted to find that home. And that's also how we've kind of introduced Thanks to the old Shapeways community. So that we're really moving the consumer community towards Thanks. And that's where you can be. And that's where your new home is. There where you can find inspiring art, inspiring whatever your hobby might be, you can find it all there. And then Shapeways, we really are focusing in the last half year and being super duper clear. Like, look, we have a solid manufacturing business here, very intelligent software. This is one of the things that we've built back in 2008 and we've been constantly investing in all those years. We run on very intelligent software that enable us to really support these customers from the moment of prototype all the way till phase out of the product, and specifically help them with this low volume manufacturing in between. And we do everything. We do not only the 3D printing, but we can vapor smooth, we can polish, we can electroplate, we do heat inserts, so we can. These digital native teams that we normally work with, they don't have big manufacturing facilities. So for us, supplying them parts that are easy to assemble into the final product is really something that we do and that we also try to highlight in our marketing now.
When you think about this next generation hardware, what does that mean to you, and why is this moment such an opportunity?
Well, it's kind of insane. I saw a video on Twitter the other week. There was like this 15-year-old kid or 14, I don't remember exactly, to be honest. But he had made a prosthesis, like an arm, because somebody had lost a piece of their arm. And he had hooked up the arm, with some kind of neural connection and with AI software. And now it's like this functioning arm that the person can steer with his brain. And it's just like, how does a 15-year-old in his parents' house make this? Yes, it's a very smart kid, obviously. But one of the reasons why this is possible is because hardware automation has really progressed in the last 10 years and also come down in pricing. On the other hand, you now have AI. So coding and developing these products, whether it's a 3D design, whether it's a software that is needed to operate it, all of that can go much quicker than even 3 or 4 years ago. So now you see this massive amount of new devices being built, whether it's a cart that goes on a train track, and inspects the railroad for material fatigue, or whether it's a cart, where there's the drones in the air for nice shows about a football stadium, or it's a drone that inspects crops and for crop health, or whether it's a really cool consumer tech product that is very specialistic for like one particular hobby, where the market size in that sense in the past, before this transition with AI, was actually kind of too small to get it live, and where the cost of developing these products was really, really high, and it would take years and big companies. And now you have a kid that's 15-year-old that can make something like that. So much smaller teams can do this. Teams that are focused on a much smaller market, and they can now bring it to market quickly at a lower cost. And then with CNC and 3D printing, now you have on-demand manufacturing technologies available that are quick and don't require a massive upfront investment like injection molding, which is needed for big mass markets, but it's not needed for these smaller markets. So all of these things are coming together to make to give the right set of circumstances that so many new types of devices, appliances, and robots are being built that will help people one way or another. So that's my answer there.
And you mentioned that the early 3D printing industry was often framed as we can make everything, right? So
Oh, yeah.
What's the reality of the industry these days?
Yeah, I mean, it's still kind of like that. There is, 3D printing, it still has this magic. If you're not used to it, especially for consumers, the fact that you can hold something in your hand that just came out of a machine like that and you can create it. I mean, we had weird things, or not weird things, but like, if a kid makes a drawing, you can actually 3D print that drawing now in 3D, with all the colors and everything. And then all of a sudden the kid has that, in their bedroom. But from a marketing point of view, there was this whole like era of magic in the early 2000s. It still exists, but you got kind of this vague thing of like, well, 3D printing can, can make prints for anybody, for anything. So then people kind of don't know what to do with this. And industrial organizations, specifically B2B customers, still in their R&D and in their product development life work, a lot of companies still don't use 3D printing. It's not, especially in bigger organizations, a lot of them have not really adopted it fully or only partially yet. There's also like one person who uses it in a product development department, but not everybody else. And so then if you sell somebody like, well, we can make everything for you that you want, like what does it actually really mean? It doesn't mean anything anymore. And the industry is slowly waking up, but there's still a lot of companies that are basically, manufacturing for all, or, we can make anything for anybody. There's still quite a few big companies that have slogans like that. And it's not very clear. So that's why we said, okay, our focus is really, we just want to say, okay, we focused on these next gen hardware companies. That is our bread and butter. We can help them develop their product more quickly, get it to market more quickly, deal with the quick iterations of new, of new products coming to market really quickly, and help them with the after service if parts need to be reprinted for things that have broken or anything like that. We can do it. So we're trying to be really way more specific on that and kind of move away. We can do anything from anybody. And then thanks on its own is of course the consumer brand.
And who is the ideal customer of Shapeways today?
The ideal customer are so they're either startups, so hardware startups. So we work with a lot of hardware startups. We work with a lot of portfolio companies of VCs that we have good relationships with. We also work with product development companies of larger, of corporates. But then we lead the product development teams there.
That's right.
And we also work with, let's say, engineering firms who build product for their clients, and then their clients end up being, our customers, because they come through us in this prototyping stage, and then we end up doing the production for these customers. But most of our customers are therefore actually small startups or medium-sized businesses that have a very specific hardware application that they build.
And on your website, you said that Shapeways make smarter, more efficient choices that are also greener. What does that look like inside operations?
Well, first of all, we work according to the ISO 14000 standard. So we've been working according to that for a long while, but we're getting certified early next year because all of that, disappeared with the bankruptcy. We're getting all that back up and running. So from operations point of view, there's a couple of things. There's like what we do when we run our operations, which is working according to those standards, working with green power when that we operate the factory with. We're actually moving into a new factory that will have solar. So those are kind of some of the basics of how we operate. But then 3D printing on its own, of course, is interesting because you have no oversupply. You make exactly what is needed. And that doesn't sound like much, but it is actually worth a lot. There's a lot of industries where there's at least 10, 20, 30% oversupply for products. So just not making too much is already, that's the best thing you can do actually for the environment in that sense. So besides working on not having that oversupply, we actually in the design for the products, we can do topology optimization. So that it means that we can make parts use less material and still be very strong, because you can make calculations around that. So you use less material, they're still strong, they're lighter. So if you think about applications in cars or airplanes and drones, that saves a lot of energy. So there's a lot to do there with 3D printing around design and topology optimization. And the last thing I think that's important there with 3D printing is that with 3D printing, you can easily make spare parts and keep a product going. We do that for a lot of cars and trucks. We do that for the existing products that we have with our customers. So that means if a product can be used longer, you don't have to invest in a new one that also takes, CO2 and materials and whatnot. So I think those are three main advantages of 3D printing, other than saying, okay, let's use a green material, which of course are things that we're working on. On the thanks side, a lot of PLA is used. That has pros and cons, but that's polylactic acid that comes from corn or other bio-derived sources. So for us, from a process point of view, we work with ISO. We're looking towards using more bio-sourced polymers, and we also, our team is really one of the best teams in the world developing printing SLS parts, selective laser sintering, and we have the highest recycling rate in our industry. So that means that reusing powder over and over again, we have a fully closed loop, which is also unheard of. And we're able to do that because we study the power. We have some very smart people who know how to upcycle this. And therefore, everything that we use, we don't throw anything away. So I think that's pretty awesome from a green perspective.
And what have you learned about connecting sustainability with profitability in a, let's say, practical business first way? Because that's something I often hear on the podcast, that most of the clients of companies usually care about ROI more than their partners being green or them being green themselves.
I think it's been a little bit of outdated thinking to think like, well, if you go green, it has to cost money or something. I think it actually goes hand in hand to profitability and being green. Because for us, think about it. We have we have the highest recycling rate in the industry for SLS. We don't throw any powder away, which means that, for our cost of goods sold, our material usage is actually really low. So that saves us money. And that helps with our profitability, so it goes hand in hand there. And even with the topology optimizations for our customers, if we can deliver a lighter product that costs our customer less in operation and their customers less in operations, they will come back to us. So this whole thing that, environment needs to necessarily clash with your ROI has never made sense to me, not in this business and not in the previous businesses that I've been in. I think it's just common sense.
And many people see the real potential of digital manufacturing in the applications. So what's the real world uses excite you most right now?
Well, I love the fact that we make, for instance, parts for a robot that drives around in a hospital that basically delivers medicine from the pharmacy up to the floor where it needs to be. As you all probably know, there's a massive shortage of medical personnel, especially nurses in the United States. And the fact that nurses can be supported like this, so they have more hands with the actual time with the patient, I think that's an amazing application. Makes me really proud to be part of that. But also things like custom knee braces that are, fully customized to the size of the patient's knee. We do that kind of work. That's an application that I really love. This is more around, making many of the same thing, but slightly different, fully custom. Those things are fun. We help also a lot in training, in training police with certain products that we made. That also makes me kind of proud. What else? You see, we do a lot of work for drones, specifically in agriculture, so helping crops, using less pesticides, crops becoming healthier, creating a bigger yield. These are fun things to supply into. Makes me proud.
You're talking about excitement, looking ahead to 2026 and beyond. What's next for Shapeways?
Well, what's next for Shapeways is next year Shapeways will move to a new facility that is much bigger than before. So it will allow us to expand because we're growing really quickly. We're doing well, and we really need that space to expand. That also means that we will be expanding into new and additional technologies on top of the ones that we currently have in-house. Because the way that we usually work is we offer a lot of different 3D printing technologies. And there's a couple of core competencies that we have ourselves. So we take more in-house to really be vertically integrated. So that is really big change for Shapeways that we're pushing for, because that will allow us to go into more different production technologies that we already offer. So that's the big thing on the Shapeways side. And for thanks, we're going to continue the platform to let the existing community that we have there really grow and be more successful. We have so many designers there that are making a living out of their 3D designs. And I expect for next year that we can double or triple the amount of people that can make a living out of 3D design.
I'll have to check that website out.
Yeah.
It sounds amazing. Marleen, we've come to the end of our podcast chat. So my
Yeah.
last question for you is, if people want to learn more about you and what you do, where can they get informed or get in touch with you?
Yeah, of course. Well, they can always go to shapeways.com and contact us through the forum there. There's a forum online, a contact form. Reach out. You can also find me on LinkedIn, so send me a message there. My name is Marleen Vogelaar. I'm sure it'll be printed somebody for anywhere who doesn't understand my Dutch pronunciation of my own name. I can't say my last name. I'm okay with Marleen, but like my last name in English, I can't do it. Well, I kind of refuse.
Well, I have the same problem with my first name, so
Yes. Well, a lot of, we all come from somewhere in America. A lot of us,
yeah.
anyhow. We do. So, no, but find me on LinkedIn or contact Shapeways through the forum or reach out. Reach out to my team of thanks. They are, of course, on Instagram. And my thanks team is also on Discord. If you'd like to be part of a growing consumer and designer community of around 3D design, we'd be happy to hear and meet you there. Yeah.
Well, I'm definitely going to join the Discord channel. Well,
Yes, you're very welcome.
well, thank you, Marleen. This has been amazing. Thank you for being my guest here at the podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to Green New Perspective. This podcast is proudly sponsored by New Perspective. We are a Boston-based marketing agency working with Cleantech clients solely for over 20 years now. And if you want to check out how we help our Cleantech clients to grow, you can click on the link in the description of this episode. If you like what we do here with the podcast, giving some amazing people from all over the clean tech space a place where they can showcase their innovative tech aimed at combating climate change, you can support us in so many ways. You can leave reviews, comments, or consider subscribing to our channel on your favorite streaming platform. We've noticed that around 75% of you who are regularly watching our show are not subscribing. So just by hitting that subscribe button, you could help us to grow, to get even more people from the climate tech space and create additional content. So please consider doing that. Thank you in advance. And of course, thank you for tuning in to this episode, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.